ASEAN Breakfast Call. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene and we are going to start our last day of this week, Friday, with more news from Southeast Asia. Together with me is, of course, my lovely...
Hi, this is Gowri, and I'm in a lot of pain today.
Why? It's the last day of the week. You should enjoy yourself.
So I went for kickboxing class the day before, right? So I thought yesterday I'll take things slow and go for yoga class. But who knew that the yoga class was 10 times tougher than the kickboxing class?
What did you do in yoga?
You have to do all kinds of crazy positions with your body.
Isn't that cool?
Isn't that what?
Isn't that cool?
Cool? Oh, it's not cool. No. If you can feel what I'm feeling right now, it's not cool.
Well, at least you are way better than me. I haven't been exercising for quite some time. I think I do need a bit of yoga here and there. Although I must say, yoga is kind of banned by the fatwa in this country.
It is
kind of
because
banned.
it does have. It's not banned for everyone. It's banned for Muslims because of the certain gestures that resembles the worship of the Hindus when you have to do the namaste pose, and also a lot of the terms are also in the Indian language as well, different dialects.
Indian language is not Hindu language.
Well,
there will always be debates whether certain things is considered against religion or not. But one thing I would like to highlight is, at the end of the day, whether it's Christmas, Hari Raya, yoga, or even, reading whatever religious text, you are not really, disbelieving your own religion. You are just trying to, adopt to certain things, certain cultural norms. And
yes, because
yoga has definitely been the modern cultural norms in today's society.
There are actually a lot of people there. If you notice, there were not many Indians actually. There were a lot of Chinese and people of other races, even Iranians were there. And they were just there to work out. They're not there to convert their religion. They're not there to worship something that is against their belief. They're just there to tone their body, as simple as that.
So at the end of the day, we have to take into consideration that, the spirit of the yoga or whatever activity it is much more important than the label itself. Yeah, it could be coming from whatever religion, but at the end of the day, if it makes you healthy, then go for it.
If it's good for you, no problem.
But one thing that Malaysian government has been in denial, they don't want to go for it, is definitely denying the links between the ministry and the Islamic State. So Malaysian government, especially the Energy, Green Technology and Water Minister Maximus Ongkili, has been denying the link of his ministry and the Islamic State after a senior ministry official was among 14 people arrested this week for suspecting being involved in ISIS recruitment. It's interesting because you would never imagine someone like a middle-class Malaysian would join ISIS, but apparently majority of them who join ISIS are not those ignorant rural guys. They are actually, they know their stuff. They are exposed to the global world. They know what is happening, and they are the ones who are actively involved in the social media. And interestingly enough, majority of them got recruited via social media as well.
And this minister was also arrested for allegedly recruiting and funding Malaysians who want to actually go abroad and join the ISIS movement in Iraq and Syria. And like you just mentioned, yes, a lot of young people are going, and it's not because they're stupid, it's not because they don't know what it is, but they're probably attracted to the whole idea because the way we interpret things can be very misleading, because earlier we were also talking about religious interpretations, and 10 people can read the Bible or the Quran and come up with 10 different interpretations. So ISIS apparently have their own idea of the interpretation of what they want to do, what they want to achieve in the name of religion, and it appeals to some people. Some people think that, okay, yeah, this makes sense, and I want to be a part of this movement and bring about some change.
Some people say ISIS has become a neo-Wahhabism, sort of militant movement, in a way that they follow exactly how the Wahhabis would interpret the Quran, which is a very strict fundamentalist sort of understanding of the Quran. But at the same time, they have this goal of creating an Islamic state. And I think the idea of Islamic state is what is attracting a lot of people all over the world, including Malaysians, especially Malaysians, because we have been debating about whether such things as Islamic State exists or not. And many Malaysians believe that Islamic State is the eventual goal of being a Muslim.
And it goes back to the social media as well. A lot of this recruitment were actually done through social media, through Facebook and whatnot, because that's the easiest way to pass on the information. And in terms of what ISIS really is about and what they stand for, they are pretty clear about it, and it goes back to fundamentalism as well, because when you go back to the root of the problem and you want to fix it from there, and they think that the best way to do it is to get rid of anyone who is in the way.
So apparently, the senior government officer, he is being suspected by the Malaysian police chief Khalid Abdul Bakar. The police chief actually alleged that the officer was one of the key recruiters in charge of funding Malaysians to join ISIS in Syria and Iraq. We have a lot of money to fund all this.
Either us or the minister.
And in fact, they apparently Malaysian police has been investigating this, and they already knew who is the perpetrator and how much they are planning for this, and it seems like they are on track.
When it comes to religion, there are always a few kind of people. One can be the maybe not ignorant, but the one who is maybe just not pretty nonchalant about everything, and one is the moderate one, and one is of course the extremist one.
But you see how diverse Malaysians are, the ones that are being recruited for ISIS. Besides the senior government officer, is a graphic designer, a chef, an event organizer, and a businessman. That is crazy.
It is, but of course, once you've gotten your mind into that state, that this is right and this is what I need to fight for in the name of my religion, that this is the right thing to do, I guess nothing makes sense to them anymore except that one goal.
It can be any of us, and it's crazy because people always assume Malaysia, being within Southeast Asia, next to Indonesia, which is the most populous but the most populous nation with Muslim in the world, and you would expect Malaysia to be a bit more progressive, moderate. Of course, we are economically progressive, but when it comes to religion, we are like 10 steps backwards. And you can see that yesterday when one of the most famous ulama in Indonesia from Jaringan Islam Liberal, Pak Ulil, he went on Skype to go and give his speech about his point of view on Islam, but he felt disappointed that he is now banned from Malaysia, because what he's preaching might be a different sort of alternative version of Islam, but is just based on interpretation in a way that he still follow the fundamentals of the religion, which is based on the Quran text.
And it's very difficult to say which interpretation is right, because it goes back to how you look at it, and
it goes with time.
Yeah, different background.
You cannot compare yourself with a person who interprets the religion 100 years ago. At the end of the day, it has to go hand in hand with the spirit of the current society that you are in.
And with all the different exposure that you have, of course, everyone will have a different interpretation of what they read, and it's hard to come to one right way of looking at things, especially when it comes to something very subjective like religious issues.
Religious issues are definitely too subjective. But what is more important is politics have penetrated into religion and has made religion into this ideology to gain the support of the masses. You see that in ISIS, but also you see that in other countries as well. Not necessarily with religion, but the idea of politics itself. And you can see how countries such as the people from the Khmer Rouge really kill a lot of people based on the ideology that they were spreading. And this is a story that I want to highlight, which is the convicted Khmer Rouge leaders are facing genocide trial. It has been going on for quite some time, but at the same time, it is something that has been long overdue.
Yes, and these leaders will resume on Friday, October 17, which is today, at a UN-backed court in Cambodia to consider charges of mass murder, forced marriage, and rape perpetrated against Vietnamese people and ethnic Muslims in the 1970s. And also, of course, their mass killings were estimated from about 100,000 to 500,000 ethnic Cham Muslims and 20,000 Vietnamese from the basis of these genocide charges. And what's interesting about this is, as prolific as they are, although they are key figures back then, it's still very likely for them to get charged, that they can actually be brought to court, and people want to seek justice. In a lot of countries, this will never even happen because of the amount of power and authority. They'll probably just get away with it. So
this definitely probably would have gotten away with it. And they're so old now. They look like grandpas, like your typical grandfather and grandmother. So to charge them now, it seems like a bit not right. I mean, it is something that you just can't comprehend. A guy, for example, this guy called Nuo Chen, he's now 88. He's known as brother number 2 and an ex-head of state Kyo Samphan, the 83, also have already been given life sentences after a separate trial at the same court in August for crime against humanity. Someone as old as him, when he created the massacre, probably it was during his younger days, probably in his 30s or in his 20s. So he wouldn't have realized how horrible it is.
Of
horrendous.
Course, when you're young and you're in power, you just want to do whatever it is that you can to sort of take over the world kind of mentality. But at the same time, there were a couple of interviews that said that the ways in which Khmer Rouge mistreated us is way too severe to describe in words, and their goal was merely to exterminate our race. And this was said by a 64-year-old Cham labor camp survivor who lost 100 of her relatives, mostly through execution during this era.
Crazy. And the mass killing of an estimated 100,000 to 500,000 ethnic Cham Muslims and 20,000 Vietnamese form the basis of genocide charges against the two of them. Before these charges were filed, the treatment of the minority Muslim groups and Vietnamese community was rarely discussed. So a lot of this discrimination comes from political power. As much as we want to blame religion, but it is beyond religion.
It definitely goes back to something that every human being is capable of doing, and something that you want to do if you feel like that is right at that time. And
as much as we see ISIS is a major threat to human society, and some pundits even say that it's because of religion. But if you look at how Pol Pot did, killing millions of people under his Khmer Rouge regime, you will realize that it is beyond religion, because Pol Pot didn't subscribe to religious ideology. He's very much an atheist, if you want to say that.
And so they've already been given life sentences and will be it is done after a separate trial in the same court for all these crimes that they have done. And
guess what the crimes are? 2 million people starving, overwork, and they were executed during the communist regime itself. And with that, we have another story that is striking. Not Southeast Asia, but Africa.
That's right.
Is not ISIS, is actually a more deadlier
Force.
force. Yeah, I would say force. It's actually the Ebola. It has been spreading throughout the world. In fact, they are worried that it could be the next zombie strike, because a lot of report saying that some people they were presumed that they have already died, but in the middle of the funeral, out of a sudden they just rose up and they're like, I'm still alive, hey. So people are scared of Ebola, and not many people actually understand the extent of Ebola.
Actually, yes. There were a lot of articles that were even comparing Ebola to the movie World War Z, the one with Brad Pitt in it, where all the zombies were infected, and they were assuming that we could just it could be the next big plague that is spreading to the entire world. And also the USA is really shaken right now with all the new cases that their people have contracted. And Ebola has also spread to the only last healthy district in Sierra Leone, and that is not a good thing, which that has also caused a lot of panic among their local and also, of course, international health authorities, who are now obviously scrambling to find ways to curb this disease.
West Africa is already a very poor nation, but it is resources rich. So for West Africa to be struck by all this, by Ebola, is actually bad for Western countries, also for Southeast Asia. For example, China and the US are major, global players when it comes to the mining the minerals and natural resources there. And Ebola definitely will have a negative economic growth, and this was stated by IMF. Economic growth in countries such as Liberia, Sierra Leone could be declined by almost 3.5% in the world's worst outbreak of Ebola, and this would cripple industries such as mining, agriculture, services, and in fact, it will somehow affect other countries such as Guinea, where industrial mining has been unaffected so far, but could fall by more than 1%. And 1%, as we all know, is a huge number. So this was stated by Bill Murray from the International Monetary Fund. And
he also said that this crisis has exposed financing gaps totaling in 100 million to 130 million each in these three countries. And IMF is working with the authorities to figure out additional funding and how they can help this country with these issues. But and actually, all these three countries are already getting loans under IMF, under programs that predate the Ebola outbreak. But now things have, of course, gotten worse, and Sierra Leone's economy itself is predicted to fall to under just 8%, all the way from 11%.
All activities, domestic food production, mining activities, and services sector, all in decline, and in a sharp fall in state revenues. And in fact, companies, especially international companies, have scaled down operations as expatriates depart the country for fear of Ebola. Public and private institutions have also scaled down operations in order to maintain the lowest possible staff headcount and thereby avoid close contact in the workplace.
Okay, we can just imagine how empty and deserted the capital must be now, because of everyone is being quarantined, and they cannot leave the house, they cannot leave the country, they cannot cannot really move around. They're
And
immobile
they have
in
to
that
have soap
sense.
all the time with them. Whenever, for example, it's not really a documentary, but it's just to show how the extent of Ebola have somehow affected the lifestyle of people in West
You mean like
Africa.
a biohazard suit?
No. So whenever they enter a bank, it can be any bank, the local bank, your local chatty down the street, they actually have to wash their hands and feet before they enter. And it is a practice. And every one of the staff there were wearing gloves and face masks. You can understand how bad it is. How bad it is they are handling the Ebola, because it is a terrible disease that you wouldn't know you actually get Ebola until 3 weeks down the road, where you get, all the symptoms like fever and all that.
And apart from that, we also have another 8 New York hospitals designated to treat these Ebola cases, and they are really panicking over there. They're having all kind of surprise drills for the hospitals to prepare for the worst. So hopefully they do find a way to curb this disease, and we can only hope for the best, because for now there is still no concrete solution yet.
So Ebola aside, in Southeast Asia, perhaps Ebola is the last thing in our mind right now when we talk about ASEAN. Of course, the recent ASEAN conferences, not really ASEAN conferences, but conferences on Southeast Asia that were happening in Kuala Lumpur. For example, the Southeast Asia Conference on Media and Internet Freedom, as well as Southeast Asian Conference on Human Rights. It shows that people are starting to get very, very interested in terms of how ASEAN would develop in itself. But at the same time, when people really talk about ASEAN, especially leaders on top, they are talking in terms of ringgit and cents, or in your dong, or in your chat, or in your whatever currency, or Singapore dollars. So apparently, this is reported by Borneo Post, ASEAN is Malaysia's biggest merchandise trade partner.
So going back to what you said earlier, we are becoming more aware of human rights issues, of internet and media freedom, because that is also a huge issue in this country. Yesterday during the discussion, a lot of people brought up things about Facebook, things about internet, and how people can just say whatever they want to say. And what's interesting about that, and this is probably a little off topic, but our Youth and Sports Minister actually said that the Sedition Act is necessary in order to prevent hate speech. But when Ideas had their Q&A yesterday night, he actually rebutted Kyrie's statement, saying that what we really need is education and awareness. We don't need a law to protect us from hate speech. And that goes back to the conference yesterday as well, because it always goes back to your mindset, to your mentality, how mature you are. You cannot just have some law that prohibits you from saying this, so I'm not going to say it. I can still say it if I want to say it.
Fair enough. But to divert from the question of freedom, when it comes to trade freedom, Malaysia definitely relies a lot on ASEAN. For example, the ASEAN accounted for 28.1% of Malaysia's exports last year. And this was stated in the Statistics Department. Actually, Statistics Department is really cool. I've accessed the department quite a few times, and they are actually very open to provide you a lot of different statistics. Of course, you have to be very sure what kind of statistic that you want, and some of it, of course, they charge you. And according to the Statistics Department, this is actually the highest percentage that we have, followed by China. So apparently Southeast Asian nation in combined total of exports have surpassed China, who in fact would before this was Malaysia's number one exports country.
And it seems like we are heading in the right direction in line with our ASEAN 2015 and the AEC that will be happening very, very soon.
And the AEC is something that a lot of people are still scratching their heads. But if you want to talk about ringgit and cents, ASEAN is Malaysia's biggest merchandise trade partner, and trade between Malaysia and other ASEAN countries are almost balanced. Shows that ASEAN countries among themselves are getting more and more interactive with each other. In the past, it used to be Malaysia with our China, East Asia, India, and all that. But now we are starting to realize that there's a huge untapped market outside of our neighboring countries, and we definitely should somehow exploit that in a positive way, of course. So just to recap about what other countries are, Singapore took a 79.5% share of the ASEAN FDI inflow in the services sector, and ASEAN FDI inflow registered a hefty $122 billion and has grown fivefold since 1995, with Malaysia receiving the fourth largest share at 10% after Singapore, which is at 50%, and Indonesia 15.1%, and Thailand 10.6%. So definitely Malaysia is moving at the right direction when it comes to the ASEAN economic community. So that's all from us today.
That's right. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we also have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to and listen to our daily podcast interviews.
So at the end of the day, we want to tell you that have a good weekend.
That's right. And next week is, of course, Deepawali, so it's
Have
probably
your
still
Murukku.
too early to wish everyone, but hey, happy Deepawali in advance.
Happy Deepawali to all.